Here we go. Hi, everybody. Sorry we're a tad late. Just doing some behind-the-scenes baking prep. Welcome to Blaze Baking with Rach. I'm so excited to be here today with my co-host, Julie Gerstenblatt, the Hoda to my Jenna, and author, baker, decorator, everything, Jane Green. Welcome, Jane. I know so many people are so excited to see her and streaming in with us. We're going to get started. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the baking show for those of you who are new to it, a little bit about Julie, a little bit about Jane, and then fun part. So welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm the Rach behind Blaze Baking with Rach. That's my claim to fame. In case you're new to the Blaze was started, A Mighty Blaze was started in February 2020 by New York Times bestselling author Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to connect writers and readers in the age of COVID and beyond. And we now have a team of 35 plus creative professionals doing things from producing to social media engagement to hosting weekly shows and monthly shows. And we're really proud of our work. We're so thankful to all the authors that come on our shows and all the readers that join us every week and every month. And I'm going to read a little bit about Julie, who's joining me while Jenna's still on her book tour. Yay. And then I'm going to read a little bit about Jane. So I'm going to put my glasses on here. Julie Gerstenblatt coaches high school students in the art of crafting a killer college essays. Her own essays have appeared in, I'm going to butcher this, how do I say it?
Oh, Cognoscenti. It's the WBUR, like Boston radio's written.
Got it. You can tell I'm not from Boston. Cognoscenti, Veller, Grown and Flown, and the Huffington Post, among other publications. This is big news. Her historical novel, A Tiny Spark, will be published by Mira HarperCollins in 2023, and that's new news. Yay. That's hot off the presses.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're so excited. It explores the intersecting lives of three very different women in the weeks leading up to and immediately following Nantucket's Great Fire of 1846. Julie has 2 master's degrees and a doctorate in education from Teachers College, Columbia University. Thank you, Julie. And I'm so happy that we have Jane, because I know Jane loves Julie, and Julie loves Jane. I love you all. So I'm going to tell you about Jane. A lot of you already know, but Jane Green is the author of 21 novels, including 18 New York Times bestsellers. She has over 10 million books in print, is published in over 25 languages, and has several books in development for film and TV. Her new book, SISTER STARDUST, is her first foray into biographical fiction, which we're going to talk about, telling the story of Talitha Getty in Marrakesh in the late 60s. And we're baking a Moroccan cake today, sort of, connecting the dots there. It comes out in April 2022 with Hanover Square Press. Jane contributes to a number of newspapers and magazines and is a graduate of the International Culinary Institute in New York. She is an avid cook, amateur decorator, and passionate gardener. She is also a regular storyteller for The Moth. Her first story for The Moth, Greener Grass, was videotaped and subsequently went viral on Facebook with over 3 million views. And I was one of those viewers. I love that.
Yeah.
So welcome, Jane. Thank you for being here.
Yes, welcome, Jane.
Thank you.
And we should say also a cookbook.
Oh, there's my cookbook.
I know.
You're seeing double.
Oh, you both have it. Oh.
Yeah, I love this cookbook. I have some favorite recipes in here.
I just need to explain though that I 4 days ago I was on Instagram in sort of quite rainy, cold-ish Connecticut, and then I saw that my best friend from London was in the Bahamas at this very swanky luxury hotel, and so I sent him a text and I was sort of joking saying, "Oh, can I come?" And he wrote back and said, "Yes." And so then I said, "Can our other best friend from London come?" And he went, "Yes." And so we're here in the Bahamas. So I think it might be a bit spotty with Wi-Fi. So I apologize if I dip in and out, but that's also why I'm in like bathing suit, caftan-tastic fabulousness, because I'm on holiday.
And we're jealous.
We love that you're in the Bahamas and that you still came through to bake with us. Like, amazing.
I'm not actually going to be baking, but I can talk about baking with you, which I love.
your recipe. Yeah.
That's okay. And may I say that this is Julie's first on-air baking performance?
Yeah.
No pressure.
And honestly, Jane, I have to say I felt comfortable because I've used your recipes before, and I'm not a confident cook or baker at all. And the last time I was on this show, I just sat there and I would not make it was challah, and I was like, nope, not doing it. But
Julie had a store-bought challah that she shared with us afterwards.
I bought a challah.
Yeah, but that's quite hard. It's quite, and the whole braiding thing, and it's quite. I can understand. I'm actually not a baker. I'm a fine cook. I'm not a big cook, but I'm a fine cook. I'm a fearless cook. But because cooking is also a bit sloppy and a bit intuitive, and because I've had some training, I sort of know what to do, and I know how to take a recipe and improve it. But baking is a bit of a disaster for me because I'm very imprecise, and you need to be very precise with baking. It really is a science. So the only things I bake are super easy and slightly idiot proof. So yes,
I'm that
to my
idiot.
idiot proof baking.
Yes.
Well, it's funny, Jane. I love to bake, and I'll bake anything. I'm up for the challenge, but I don't love to cook as much. I'm more, I guess I'm more of a scientist. I'm not as intimidated by baking. With cooking, I also like instructions. With cooking, I don't like, throw a little this and add a little that and maybe do, I like the order of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's really funny actually, because even the way that I wrote Taste as a cookbook, I sort of wrote it a bit like I was writing it for myself. So it's quite vague really. And I sort of presume that people may want to. I quite like recipes where, well, you don't have any of this in your cupboard, you can use this. And that tends to be how I do it, which is why baking so often ends very, very for me. But yes, I think cooks do tend to fall into two groups.
Yeah. So before we get started on this recipe, can you tell us where this recipe came from and why you chose it for today?
Yeah, I mean, I love, well, I'm slightly obsessed with Morocco, which we will come to when I talk about Sister Stardust, but I hadn't been to Morocco actually, and my parents who live in London were spending winters in Morocco, and we just couldn't get there. Too many kids and too complicated, and eventually we went about 3 years ago, and I just fell so madly in love with it. I love Moroccan food. So even before I went, I was cooking tagines and making bastilla, and for my 50th birthday party, I did a Moroccan themed birthday party with a Moroccan tent and floor pillows and lanterns, and we had a belly dance. It was fantastic, and I hadn't even been, but so finally going was extraordinary, and I loved it. And Meskouta is just a very simple orange cake that is served with tea. So in Morocco, you drink sweetened mint tea all day, and you drink it in these little jeweled glasses, and they pour it from a great height, and it's always slightly frightening because you think it's going to miss, but they hold, and this beautiful stream of sparkling green liquid goes into these little jeweled glasses, and then you often will drink your Meskouta with tea or for breakfast. And then the other thing that the way that I really adapted this recipe was something that I did years ago with lemon almond cake recipe that's in my cookbook In Good Taste, which is I decided that I would actually boil the whole lemon, because the holes, and that may have been, I have a feeling that may have come from Nigella Lawson, actually. I think she may have done that with something. But so I think she boiled a lemon. She covered it with water and boiled it for about half an hour or an hour until it was really soft, and then just pureed, took out the pips, but pureed the whole thing. And I decided I'd try and do that. I'd nuke it in the microwave, and it was very successful. And so now any cake that involves oranges or lemons, it just really intensifies that citrusy flavor. And I also like cakes that are moist. And so this keeps a cake nice and moist. It's quite sort of dense and moist.
So, first of all, can I just say that when Jane talks about anything, it sounds so good, and telling stories just orally too, the best. And I will tell you, I was really intimidated by that whole idea of boiling the oranges. And so then I saw the microwaving thing, which sounded a lot better, but I was still really confused about using the whole orange. But you really do, except for the pits, you said, like in the pits, the white part.
Yeah, Julie and I were messaging back and forth about that part, actually.
Yeah, you know, and that's where my sloppiness is apparent in recipes, because actually I should have said, of course, and remove the pips before you puree it, and that's where I'm a little bit all over the place. I blame my ADD.
Well, that's okay. And on this show, we've been able, like you said earlier, we've been able to quickly substitute things, use what you have, especially when we launched the show in the beginning of the pandemic, when you couldn't get things in various stores or you couldn't get out.
Yeah.
Like that. So why don't we, I always say I'm like the camp counselor. I move us along. Let's get going with actually making. And Julie and I, for those of you baking with us at home, we've already put our dry ingredients together.
No, I haven't. I've only put the flour in the bowl, but I'm going to do the rest.
So the dry ingredients in one bowl are 2 cups of flour, and I will speak as Julie White does the stuff.
Yes. I will show you the pouring of the salt. Yes.
A half a teaspoon of salt and 3 teaspoons of baking powder, right?
And Jane, do you use kosher salt, or do you use like iodized salt before I put this in?
Only ever use salt.
Kosher.
Yeah.
Okay. I roll this out and get my kosher salt.
Yes.
Not to be a teacher's pet, but I did.
Are you're using kosher salt? Do you feel the same way?
I do. It's like the texture and the taste, and I just
good.
Yeah.
So we have that together in here, and
it really was a baking soda. I missed it.
Baking powder, Julie.
Yeah. So can I just say, Julie, I'm really impressed that you're baking on camera, because I know how intimidating it is, and I haven't done it very much, and I did when the cookbook came out, I was invited onto some and I had a baking slot, and of course I didn't realize that it was only about 3 minutes or something, or 4 minutes. And it is amazing how quickly 4 minutes goes when you're, and it was perhaps the only cooking slot that had no cooking whatsoever. I just stood there talking, and then all of a sudden it was, thank you so much, Jane Green. And there was no food. So I'm very impressed. I know we have time though as well, which helps.
Yes, we have time, and I did set up a little ahead of time. Yes, I've been anxious for like 3 days, but I'm good now. Now that I'm here with you guys, I'm like, good. I've
been coaching her through it.
Yes.
Jane, this show sort of started organically. Before I started with the Blaze, I would teach Zoom baking classes in the beginning of the pandemic with friends, and it grew and it grew and it grew. So then when I started talking to Jenna, this is kind of how it came together.
Yeah.
And no, baking on air is a little different, but I always say mise en place, like get everything together, be organized, and if things mess up,
I'm gonna go get my baking powder.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, with the mise en place, which is kind of organization, whenever people ask me about culinary school, I always say there are a couple of things. There were 3 things that changed my life about culinary school. The first was that I'm not a great cook. I'm not gifted. I mean, everybody thinks I am, because very few people that I know cook. The women in America, it's very different to England. Everybody I know in England, but in America, nobody I know cooks. And so they think I'm this fabulous cook, but I'm really not. I'm just a home cook, really. So I learned that I wasn't never make it as a chef. I'm just not good enough. And the other thing I learned was how to make a really, really good French omelette, which is quite important. And then the third thing, organization, mise en place, because of the ADD and my sort of being all over the place. When I cooked in the kitchen, afterwards it was like 3,000 bottles exploded, and so cleanup was exhausting, and everything was disorganized, and everything took forever. And actually the most brilliant and useful thing I learned at culinary school was the mise en place, having in its place, everything that's going to be prepared on your left when, you know, I have a bowl in front where all the scraps go, and then everything moves to the right when you're done. And also, as soon as I finish using anything, I take it straight to the sink, wash it up, put it on the drying rack. And it means that I can cook for 30 people, and by the time I finish cooking, the kitchen looks the same as it did when I started, and that has actually been transformative in my enjoyment of cooking, actually, as much as anything else.
By the way, those are great tips for everybody who's getting ready or getting nervous to cook for Thanksgiving on Thursday. I think that's what I host every year, and I try to clean as I go.
Right.
Yeah, it really does. You think that it's fine, just pile up by the sink, and you think, well, I'll clean it up later. But actually, it's so much easier and quicker to just do it. You're just quickly wiping out a bowl, and then the kitchen's just done, and it's lovely.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like what happens at Thanksgiving at my house, but it sounds it's great. It's aspirational.
It might do this
things ahead of time, or like make, you know, the cranberry relish a day before. The pies are baked. So the day of, it's mostly about the turkey, so it's not too bad.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Well, so if we have our dry ingredients together, I think we're gonna go to the next step, which is we're gonna put. I'm just looking at you. Okay, I should say this ahead of time. I forgot to say this last time. If you're baking with us at home, preheat your oven, please, to 350. And then for your pan, I'm using a bundt pan here. I already greased and floured it.
I did too.
Look at that.
Flour it though.
You get it.
You know what? I'm mise en half.
Mise en half.
Because I did like the greasing, but not the flouring. I did the wet ingredients ahead of time. I have some of it set up. I've got my zested.
And we have our orange juice already prepared. I just did some fresh squeezed orange juice right here. I didn't cook it, which I probably should have, but I didn't.
Right.
And I think Julie's using regular orange juice.
Oh yeah,
I went to still be delicious.
Totally
it's just
fine.
if you replace zesting and juicing with boiling or nuking the orange, it's going to just give it a much stronger flavor. But the traditional recipe is absolutely just zesting and juicing.
Okay, that's good to know. So we're gonna, in our bowl that we're using with our mixer, we're gonna beat the 4 eggs in there along with the 1.5 cups of sugar.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna crack my eggs here.
Oh, and can I talk about creaming eggs and sugar together for a second?
Please do.
Because this is just another tip that I learned, which is that the longer you cream, it's not about combining the eggs and sugar. You actually need to until they're pale. The color will change completely, and it will turn to sort of a very pale yellow. And the longer you blend, the fluffier and lighter your cake will be. And that's true of anything that requires blending eggs and sugar.
Okay, so if we have the 4 eggs like this, do we want to blend them separately first, or do you want to do it with the sugar together?
I mean, I do it together. I do it all together. I'm all about ease. You just need to blend for long enough that the color becomes pale.
Okay, so this is 1.5 cups of sugar that I'm adding.
I'm looking at my sugar. 1.5 cups. Got it.
Okay, and I'm gonna start to blend to get that lovely pale color.
All right, me too.
And the other thing is, this is the other thing about kinds of recipes that I love. If you're gluten-free, you can substitute flour for almond flour, which is also equally delicious. So you just use the same amount of flour, but substitute it for almond flour. And then if I do that, which I do sometimes do, I will add almond extract instead of, which just makes it taste like marzipan.
Okay.
It's yummy.
Wow, that sounds great. And you know, we've talked about your gluten-free baking, and you know some of the things that, like, I don't remember if you are gluten-free or somebody has celiac, but both Rachel someone with celiac. Well, I think your daughter is like,
my daughter doesn't eat a lot. My daughter's pretty much gluten-free. So and Julie's daughter.
And my daughter has celiac. So
as does our eldest. So yes.
Right.
Can you hear me okay with this? Is this okay blending?
I can.
Okay. All right. So this is another. I feel like my KitchenAid stand mixer is like a character on the show.
Yeah. Is mine too loud?
No, I think we're good. So
Do
we
you
did
keep it out? Is it out in your kitchen all the time, or do you sort of walk it back and forth to a
Yes,
cupboard?
mine is out. It's so heavy.
I know.
And
I know.
I put mine away and then like get all the back strength to like take it down from the shelf. My stepfather, when he redid the kitchen in their country house with my mom, he had like one of those shelves built in the cabinet that raises up and lowers, and it just gets. He was a baker, and he was baking all the time.
Yeah.
Just useful.
It's funny. So I've just moved house from my lovely, lovely, large, creaky cottage to the very sweet mouse house, which is teeny tiny with a tiny kitchen. There's no room for anything, so actually I'm keeping everything in the basement, so it's up and down the stairs all the time. And also because all my children have now flown the nest, I had all these strapping boys, so I could say, "Oh, Jasper, can you just go and bring the mixer in and bring the blender?" And now it's just me. So I haven't actually done any baking. I've only cooked 2 meals since we moved, which I ought to change.
It's a celebration of where you are now, and of having this empty nest and decorating the mouse house, which is adorable and lovely. And I've seen the transformation, and so enjoy it. Don't worry about it.
And for those of you who don't already follow Jane on Instagram, you should, because you can see the pictures of Creaky Cottage and all her beautiful, all her beautiful things that she posts. So it's really fun to follow her. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's funny. I do rather feel that whilst I do love cooking, I have cooked dinner pretty much every night for 20 years. And so it's just really lovely to do things like, throw something together from the fridge or make a soup or get takeout. I'm just loving actually not having to wake up and think, how do I feed a massive family tonight? What am I going to make?
Yeah. That's one of the things. My daughter's a junior. My son is off at college already. And so before I know it, I'll be an empty nester. And as much as I'm not looking forward to that, I am looking forward to that freedom of the dinners, of the flexibility of just me and my husband and what are you in the mood for. And, also we have a wider interest in food than our kids do. So we can eat things like that they don't like and not, worry about.
Well, that's the other thing. It's when the kids are home, it's a full meal. You're thinking about, a protein and vegetables and a cup. Whereas now, when my husband asks me what's the dinner plan, sometimes I feel like saying, can we just have toast? Or why dinner? Why bother? Let's just, have a cocktail and go to bed.
Yeah, cocktail and some popcorn, Netflix.
That's amazing.
Oh gosh, that actually, I could do a cocktail and chips or a cheese platter and be very happy.
I would need a little ice cream after that.
Okay.
Well, that's always a good thing.
Right. I'm a year behind Julie too, because I have a senior in high school and a sophomore in high school. So I see it coming. Yeah.
Do you know, I will say, I'm sure there are lots of people watching who are either coming up to this or have gone through it or going through it. It's so different. I don't know. I'd sort of forget who you were before you became defined as a mother. And it's this extraordinary thing where suddenly you're a bit lost and a bit sad, but also a bit relieved and quite happy. But just getting used to things like your friend saying, come to the Bahamas, and you just book a flight and
I feel like I could get used to that.
No, I want more travel. I do. I want more travel in my life.
Yeah.
I want the food stuff, like I said, just much more fun, meal times and flexible things like that. And I think it's gonna be good. And also get rid of the big house. I think, I don't know if yours was tied into that too, but I'm like thinking about, where do I want to be? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do?
We may buy. If we don't know what we're going to do, but we're always sort of saying, should we buy a house in Morocco? Should we buy a house in Nevis? Maybe buy a house in Santa Fe? I don't know. Like anything is possible. Maybe we'll buy another bigger house in Westport. But I really love having a little actually. I didn't think I would, but I don't like having a little kitchen. So
Right.
we may at some point expand the kitchen so we can actually have people over. But I love a little house. I love that when I go to bed, when we come downstairs in the morning, the kitchen looks exactly the same as it did the night before. I still can't quite get over it. There's nothing in the sink. And there are no shoes littered around the hallway, or backpacks, or coats flung over chairs. It's kind of glorious.
Right.
Jane, do you find with the having the kids out of the house now? I mean, you're so prolific in your writing, but has your writing schedule changed over the years? Like, how do you find time for that? What is your, daily or weekly or monthly writing schedule, and how do you fit that in?
So my writing changed during COVID because I've written outside the house for years and years, and I had to learn to write at home again. So that was really hard. And also because I wasn't going out, I had always written in the mornings. The afternoons were always with the kids, and suddenly everybody was home and nobody needed me. So I'd write all day. So I wasn't quite as rigorous about to be at my desk by 10 a.m. or 9 a.m. And so now I'll often write in the afternoons. Excuse me, but I've really, COVID's been it's been for everybody, and I found myself this past year like in a proper depression. Various things going on, and I do suffer from depression, and it was just a very, very hard year. So I actually could not write for most of this year, and I wrote something about this the other day, that I spent much of this year in bed actually, and really just wanting to get my life back, but also recognizing that it would pass at some point, and I just had to sort of accept it and wait. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, I looked at photos in the last few weeks, and I did this fantastic event with Jenna Blum, who is one of my, sister girls. And then I had a fantastic event with Quan Barry and Ellen Hildebrand. And afterwards, I was looking at the photographs from both those events, and I was thinking, what's different in my life? And I realized I'm happy again. I'm out of the depression, and I've started writing again. I don't think I could have written before, but I am writing again. I just feel like I have my life back, and I found myself again. And so I also have joined a little writing room in my town because I need the routine. I still do, especially having just moved house, if I try and work at home, I'm constantly thinking, oh, but I wanted to wallpaper the den, and then all of a sudden, like before I know it, half a wall or half a room is wallpapered, and there are too many distractions. So actually I've joined this lovely little it's called the Story Lab in town, and I can go and write. So my schedule is much the same. I just have more hours in every day.
That's great. That's really, thank you for sharing that. There's a lot in there. I think it's a hard year for a lot of people, especially those of us who are writers or people who worked from home to begin with, or, everything just changed. And it's hard to, while there were some people who were saying, I'm getting all these home projects done, I'm doing all these things, there were some people who couldn't really find the time or the mental space for it because of, childcare or depression or fear or a lot of things.
Yeah. My husband, who is a therapist, says that, if our lives look and feel much the same, if we haven't been particularly affected financially and we're in the same house, or we often don't realize the anxiety and the depression that we are all living through a global pandemic, and it can come out sideways, it can come out in different ways, but there is no doubt that even if you think you're fine, we have all had a hard time, whether or not we're aware of it, just living with this and living with the news. Although actually I don't read the news anymore or watch it or any. I live in a bubble again, because I just found that was a huge contributing factor to my depression and anxiety, and life is easier when I pretend that everything's wonderful. going my
Good for
way.
you. We can just bake
That's
together.
a coping strategy, and if it helps you and it's not changing, the bad news is there. It's okay if you don't tune in; it'll still happen, and the good news. But yeah. I feel that all the time, and the waves, and knowing that you're going to get past it, or like knowing that there will, just reminding yourself that there'll be a better day coming, and then also the waves of PTSD hit me. At strange moments that, I'm not over this, and it's going to come back to me. My son, his lung collapsed during COVID. The hospitals were closed, and he was graduating from high school and couldn't graduate and didn't have a prom. And luckily, the lung, they did let us into the hospital, just he and I, and he was fine. But I'm still traumatized.
Oh my God! I could cry. I mean, I feel that. That is what an unimaginably stressful thing, and that trauma will last a while. Yeah. But I think it's really important, though, for those of us who are going through those hard times to really actually just remember that this too shall pass. It always does, and really accept that you're in. I think it gets harder when you try and fight it, or you feel guilty, or you feel like you're letting people down. You have to just accept this is where I am today. It will pass, and just sort of embrace it, and also find the thing that gives you comfort, whether it's losing yourself in books or a Netflix show or
baking,
which is what I do, or bake. Exactly. And actually baking and cooking is one of those very, very grounding things. And also for me, gardening, I don't wear gloves, I get filthy, but there's something about hands in the soil that kind of grounds me.
Right.
So true. Wait, I'm loving this conversation. Speaking of baking, so let's.
Oh, sorry. Is this a baking show? I forgot.
Well, this is writing therapy.
No.
It's many things. So we're gonna add the
flour.
To the.
Do you add it while it's on a slow mix?
I do that. Do you do that, Jane? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I do. Yeah.
I'm going to do that.
I'm sort of gonna add it in thirds here. And then, we're moving along here. Yeah. But Jane, I was recently talking about this with actually a trauma therapist on a podcast about how baking sometimes is grief work, or it's just getting through the day work. Like you can, for whatever, or gardening, or whatever you want to do, or writing, so many different things.
Yeah.
Back to writing a little bit, and Julie was talking about your voice, and I read The Friends We Keep, which came out in 2020. So how has that been, like, sort of promoting that book in the age of COVID, I guess?
Well, I didn't. I mean, The Friends We Keep was also, I know people love it, but it wasn't. Some of the books that I've written have come like truly from my heart, and We Keep, I really enjoyed writing it. I'm proud of it, but it wasn't a book that was from my heart. And it also came out, the hardcover, I think came out, I want to say possibly 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago. It was a while ago.
You in person.
Okay, so it was a paperback. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
The hardcover with Reading with Robin, I think.
And so what was that, Julie? Was that 4 years ago?
2019.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so, 3 years ago. And so I sort of, because I'm so used to having a book a year, because for such a long time I had a book every year, I would do a mad flurry of promoting that book when it came out. And then, of course, I'm on to the next one. And so maybe there's 3 months promotion, but then I don't really think about it again. So this is very unusual for me to have this much of a gap between books. But it's also unusual because I the book that is coming out in April, Sister Stardust, is historical fiction / biographical fiction, and required huge amounts of research. Needed time for that. So I haven't even thought about the friends we keep for ages and ages.
I just wanted to mention it because I recently read it and I loved it.
So
Oh, good. Thank you.
But
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
You're new, and I did love it too, and it was so nice to see. And I had just gone to my college reunion, and college was on the brain, and then here was your book. But tell us about Sister Stardust and what you created, and what it's like writing about a real person and trying to keep that. It sounds like, because you call it biographical fiction, and I was thinking of it as historical fiction. So what do you see as the differences?
I mean, I thought it was historical fiction, but then my publisher keeps referring to it as biographical fiction. I don't really know what the difference is. I think the difference is that it does center around a real woman, and so there was a lot of research about her, but I don't know, actually. I don't really know. Okay. I think maybe historical fiction is more a time. So you're, World War II, but it's not necessarily real people, or if there are real people, they're little sort of cameos, but you're not researching people in quite the same way. I wonder. That's a guess. I don't know.
I mean, that makes sense. She says, having written historical fiction, but not really knowing the difference. But
and very enlightening, because I was wondering too what the difference was.
And I have a real person in my novel, but I fictionalized her a lot. When it sounds like you really are sticking to, tell us about Talitha Getty, and am I saying it right? And
I too called her Talitha for years, but now I have actually spoken to friends of hers. I know that it is in fact Talitha, but it all started for me when I saw a photograph, which I saw trying to. Can you see that clearly? So I saw that photograph when I was a teenager. I was just completely smitten, actually, by everything. There was something so enigmatic about her expression, and this fabulous embroidered caftan lined with purple silk, and then her husband in this sort of hooded robe behind her, and I've just always known about her and wanted to know more. And then after I went to Morocco, we actually became great friends with this man, Mohammed, who owns a riad in Marrakesh. But as a boy, he worked at their home in Marrakesh. He was one of their houseboys. And the story is that Talitha Getty was born in Java during World War II. And in fact, she was Dutch, and her father was a painter, and he went to Java to paint. And it was part of the Dutch East Indies. But while they were living there, the Japanese invaded, and they rounded up all of the Dutch and threw them into Japanese internment camps, prison camps, that were there was a lot of violence and torture, and it was a really, really hard experience for them. And so the guards would kind of poke their fingers into the children's eyes, and Talitha was very traumatized by her years there. Her first few years in the Japanese camps, and in fact her mother didn't survive the trauma. Her mother died shortly after being released from the camps, and her father remarried an English woman who was actually the daughter of the very famous English painter and Augustus John, and they moved to London, and Talitha grew into this extraordinary beauty, and she wanted to be she was a sort of an it girl in London and a society girl. And she wanted to be an actress, and Rudolf Nureyev was mad for her, he adored her, and she was invited to a dinner party at the home of Klaus von Bülow, who later was alleged to have murdered his wife Sunny. And at the dinner party, Rudolf Nureyev was supposed to be her sitting next to her, but he couldn't make it, and so Paul Getty Jr. showed up instead, and Paul Jr. was the son of the man who at the time was the richest man in the world. And of course, he fell madly in love with Talitha and just her off, and they were married soon after that. And he lived in Rome. He ran Getty Italia, the Italian branch of his father's oil company, and went to Marrakesh for their honeymoon. While they were there, they stumbled upon this dilapidated old palace it had been sort of abandoned. It was crumbling, it was falling down. And with a friend of theirs from Rome, an American decorator called Bill Willis. And Bill was like, sugar, I'll do it for you. You must buy this. And by the end of the day, they had bought this palace, which is called Palais du Zahir. And Talita nicknamed it the Pleasure Palace. And they spent all this time renovating it. Exquisite. Bill Willis was known for very elaborate tile work and ornate carved plaster and tadlact and Alige is the tile work. And he just he just turned it into this exquisite palace with huge high ceilings and rooms and courtyards everywhere with fountains. And they had a housewarming party on New Year's Eve in 1967. And Paul McCartney and John Lennon were so stoned, and the entire party lying on their backs on the floor, not talking. They couldn't get up off the floor. And because it was the 60s and it was the time of counterculture, anyone was North African hippie trail in Europe. You know, everybody in America was going to Woodstock, but in Europe they were all doing this North African the hippie trail. So they'd all stopped Paul and Talita Getty's house on the way. So from Lennon and McCartney to the Rolling Stones were great friends, particularly Mick Jagger and Mary. They were there all the time. Gore Vidal, William S. Burroughs, Jane Fonda. I mean, everybody spent time at the Gettys, and it was this incredibly hedonistic, almost orgiastic time. And Talita would host these extraordinary parties for dinner for 30 every night, picnics in the Atlas Mountains, where she'd all her houseboys carry out carpets, Persian rugs, and brass trays with these incredible foods, and they'd all picnic in the desert. And in the morning, she'd walk through the souk in the Medina, and she'd find performers and jugglers to come and entertain them at night. And of course, Vogue would write about them all the time. It seemed to be fantastically glamorous and wonderful. But behind closed doors, of course, they were diving into, well, first of all, opium addiction, both of them, and then eventually heroin addiction. And actually, Talita died of a heroin overdose under rather suspicious circumstances in 1971 when she was 30.
What an amazing story.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And Sister Stardust is the story of a young woman who is born in the country in Dorset in England, and comes of age in the 60s when London is suddenly coming to life. It's the swinging 60s. London finally has its own music. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and actually the Rolling Stones. I knew nothing about the Rolling Stones really, but in my research, I realized how inextricably linked their story is, with Paul and Getty. And so they really ended up inspiring so much of this story, particularly Keith Richards and Anita Pallenberg and Brian Jones. But she moves to London to be part of Singing London, and she ends up falling in with this sort of quite glamorous crowd who whisk her off to Marrakesh to stay Paul and Talita Getty's, and of course she falls madly in love with everything there, not realizing how dark and how dangerous it's going. So that's Sister Stardust, which comes out April 5th and is available for pre-order now.
We can pre-order it now. That was my question.
You can,
Amazing.
and
okay. So I think
pre-order it.
We'll put up the link to do that. And I just love, Jane, that you spent years researching this and then writing this, and that you're still so passionate about the topic. And so
I feel like we've gotten like the preview, the audio preview,
yes.
and I can't wait to read it. And when I do, I think I'll have to bake this cake again.
Okay, we're getting back to baking the cake.
We don't have much time left, so we're going to add the orange juice in whatever form you have. Okay. I mean, it sounds kind of silly to be talking about orange juice after I just heard that amazing story. But we're going to add the orange juice, a teaspoon of vanilla, and the orange zest, and that's really it. Yeah.
And if you have cooked your orange either, you know, in a pot on a stove in water, or nuked it in a microwave in water, just remove the water, cut the orange in half, remove the pips, and puree orange, and it'll just be like sort of mush. It'll look like baby applesauce, and that you can just fold that in.
You know what we forgot to add? Well, I mean, I forgot to mention it was the oil. Throw that in. Thank you. Sorry. I was so enthralled with the story.
Oh.
Yeah, and by the way, Jane, I want to be at your launch party, because if you do anything, even if remotely connected.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, I am still completely obsessed with everything to do with Talita Getty and Marrakesh in the 60s. And I have a really good friend who has a fashion company called Maison Marché Style. And she is a very experienced fashion retailer, and she's worked in fashion forever. She and I are actually in the midst of putting together a small line of jewelry and caftans inspired by Talita. So in fact, when I go on the road, and I am doing some in-person events, she is coming with me. So it's going to be like a little traveling souk. So, you know, there will be all kinds of wonderful sort of Moroccan retro-y things that you can buy as well, designed by us.
Oh my gosh, that's
so I'm sure as we get closer, the events will be on your website, Jane, and on social media, so people can look to you know, go to these events to order your caftans, which I will be doing. And I'll offer catering services for the events. I'll make the cake.
Perfect. Lovely. I love it.
When do we add the zest?
Oh, I already did it, Julie.
Okay, I'm going to do that now.
Roll in the zest. I have everything. I don't make, but I have it all together. It smells so wonderful.
It does.
Oh, I'm gonna have it with some tea this afternoon, and I love
perfect.
I love that you said we could have it for breakfast, because what's better than cake for breakfast?
And I might have it for dinner and practice my
That's amazing. I'm gonna add it to my pan just so everyone, you know, has all the directions at home, and then we just put it in the oven for, I can't remember how long, but I have it written down.
Hold on, I'm going to check I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I will tell you in a second.
Hang on,
you add it to the oven for about 40 minutes. And so you actually, you know, you can always stick a tooth, because everybody's oven is different. And so you know, will often just stick a toothpick or a skewer into the cake just to check that it's dry, that it doesn't come out wet. That's
and after it's cooled and transferred, you can add some confection sugar on there, some orange slices. Make it look beautiful.
But do wait until that's the real reason I think that I'm not a great cook, and I'll never be a great cook, and I'm not a great baker, is because I have no patience. And so, and you really, especially to be a baker, you do need to be patient. And one of the things that I've done many times is I've sprinkled confectioner's sugar through a sieve on a warm cake, and of course it then just melts into the cake. So if you are going to dust it with sugar, you must wait for it to cool down. Don't do a Jane. Wait. Be patient.
I feel like we're coming to the end. I'm wondering if we have any audience questions or anything we've left out, Julie, that you can think of. I don't mean to rush you at the end. I feel like I could listen to you talk about Sister Stardust and the research behind it forever. And maybe you'll come back on one of the Blaze shows this spring to talk about it.
I would love to. I would love to come back around the time of release.
That would be wonderful, for sure.
Yeah.
I see a question.
we have a question. Is there a favorite food you enjoy cooking?
Well, I find that as I get older, when I was younger, and because I went to the school I went to at the time was the French Culinary Institute, so it was Escoffier, and Jacques Pepin is one of the directors of the school. So it was fine French cooking. That's not the way I like to cook because I don't have patience. So that's one of the things I love about Moroccan food is tagine. It's one pot cooking. My most favorite accessory has become the pot, and I tend to use it as a pressure cooker rather than a slow cooker, but I love anything that can be sort of thrown in, because the other thing that I really love entertaining, but I don't want to be stressed about food or sauteing things at the last minute. And so I really learned this from Ina Garten, because caterer, she prepares everything in advance, and Julie, you were saying, or one of you was saying, that you do all the side dishes for Thanksgiving early, and it's right, because actually when people come to my house for a meal, it's never about the food. It's about stepping over the threshold and feeling comforted and warm and safe, and I want to serve people the kind of food that makes them feel loved. And for me, that means really I need to be relaxed. And so one pot casseroles, cassoulet, anything. I love sort of a Moroccan chicken with preserved lemons and olives, that kind of food where you sort of serve it on a platter on a bed of couscous or rice, and just sort of spoon it down the middle, scatter some pine nuts and cilantro, and it looks amazing, and it's easy. So that's my favorite.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm going to go back to your cookbook to see some of your recipes. I love Ina Garten.
I love Ina Garten too, but I will say, like, of your recipes, I made for a crowd for New Year's Eve. It was the ginger trifle. Is that what it is? It's with the pudding layer and the whipped cream layer and the gingerbread and the fresh ginger, and it was so good. It's so good. We made that. Well, you had that at the party. It was like the Reading with Robin.
Yes, Robin had that made.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a pumpkin gingerbread trifle. And actually, that is our Thanksgiving dessert every year. And I'm realizing that I better get shopping as soon as I get home, because if I don't serve that, there's going to be trouble. I'll be in big trouble because my children.
I love a good trifle.
So good. And I also make the shepherd's pie regularly on the regular.
Proper British shepherd's pie.
It's
proper.
Yes.
Right.
And I also like this all day.
Yes, the ginger chicken I make all the time.
The ginger chicken.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. This is a wonderful cookbook. I mean, I know so many people know Jane for your wonderful novels. This cookbook is really, and it's beautiful, and the pictures are beautiful. When I actually made this cake a couple weeks ago to prepare for this, and I was trying to be a food stylist, and I took a picture of my kitchen with oranges and orchids and things like that to try to make it good. Yeah. So. Yeah.
And the other thing is that with every recipe is a story from my life, so it's also like a little window into my home.
Yeah, it's so fabulous. So everybody, pre-order Sister Stardust and get your copy of
Good Taste.
Definitely.
Which I feel like this is not even an advertisement. This is like from my heart. I love this.
I always have cookbooks out on my counter. It's one of them.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, and moving on to our next show, which I just want to preview a little bit, and Jane mentioned her earlier, on Saturday, December 11th, which I believe is in 3 weeks, I will be having on the author of Woodrow on the Bench, Jenna Blum. And we're going to bake together, which is going to be so much fun. We're going to bake maple shortbread cookies. And I know, as a lot of you know, Jenna's been on the road, and I miss her, as we all do, and I can't wait to talk to her about.
So I just need to say that her maple bacon shortbread cookies are the most insane cookies I've ever had in my life.
How could I forget bacon? Yes.
They're amazing. I mean, and that's exactly it. There's bacon in these cookies, which shouldn't make sense, but they're unbelievable.
I've never had them. I'm gonna have to. I'll watch you guys make them, and
They're
I'll
like
And
butter.
also, I mean, bacon is a part of her book too, so we'll learn
right.
a little
Bacon
bit
is
about
big.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, what's not to like?
Right,
So
exactly.
definitely tune in for that and check out all the other Blaze shows. Pre-order Jane's book. You know, I always say if you have any last minute baking Thanksgiving questions, we'll be like the baking butterball hotline. You can message me on social media. But this was just really so much fun. I'm gonna go over to the other side of my island right now to sign us off. So thank you guys so much for being here. And we'll
Thank
see
you. Thank you to Julie and Rachel and everybody at Mighty Blaze, and thank you to everybody tuning in. This was really just lovely.
Really
Thank you
fun.
guys.
And
We'll
happy
see you next time.
Thanksgiving,
Happy
everyone.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.